that are typically undertaken within the national statistical system. And that is very important for us today because the CSOs are part of the NSS. And also, by extension, you're also mandated to ensure that we establish standards, and also ensure that the best practices and methods in the production and dissemination of statistical information in the country. So you'd like to ask yourself, why statistics? We all know that we need to make informed decision. Typically, if you cannot measure it, you can't improve on it. So these decisions are very important, whether it's planning, whether it is budgeting, whether it is development of the policies, development of the programs, whether you're monitoring, evaluation, and also as you track the progress. You've really gone ahead, just back to the previous slides. So, but most importantly is we need to ensure that we just not produce statistics, but also ensure that what we produce is quality statistics. And by quality statistics, there are several elements that needs to be considered. So first and foremost, is information correct? That essentially just entails accuracy, and how comprehensive is this information? Typically, how complete is your information? Also, are your statistics reliable? Does this information contradict with other trusted sources? You also have to ensure validity of this information, the relevance, and also timeliness, because you want to give people data or information that is up to date and that can inform the current situation of the country. Next. So briefly on production of gender statistics. So as I mentioned earlier, this is not really a process, but basically what do we need to consider when you're producing gender statistics? So it goes beyond having a sex disaggregated indicator in the questionnaire. So there's a lot that gets into production of gender statistics. So there are two key elements in this. So first and foremost, how do we integrate a gender perspective into the data production process? So in the entire data value chain, right from where you're specifying your needs to where you're doing evaluation, how do you ensure that gender perspectives are integrated in the process? And secondly, since gender is a cross-cutting issue, we need to also acknowledge the fact that, gender statistics, or just appreciate the multidisciplinary nature of gender statistics. So during the data production process, when identifying your needs, are topical or policy issues related to gender statistics or gender issues addressed? And the design stage as well, when you're doing the questionnaire design, which essentially informs the outputs, are relevant gender issues identified, or gender specific concepts and measurements that are taken into consideration in that. So the entire process has to ensure that all these elements are taken into consideration. Manual development during the sampling, during the report analysis, during also communication of gender statistics, which is very key, so that this will inform on how we use the gender statistics. So when we come to how to integrate the gender statistics or integrating the statistics into all the statistics produced, so there are a lot of gender issues in all sectors. So what are the relevant gender issues, for example, in health? What are the relevant issues in education? What are the relevant gender issues in labor? All those things need to actually be taken into consideration before you actually produce your statistics. Yep. Next slide, please. So we have a variety of uses of gender statistics. And just to mention a few, gender stats is very useful in terms of identifying the gender disparities. And this typically just to promote the understanding of the actual situation that women and men live in the society, and which also addresses, the gender-based analysis and further research. That is very key for us. And then also in terms of monitoring the progress on gender equality and also women empowerment. So gender statistics are also very key in this, as we need to also measure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights, the fundamental rights of women and girls. So this is really core. Another very great use of gender statistics is during the development and monitoring evaluation of policies and programs, and anything that is oriented to gender issues, and we all know that if you don't address gender issues in developing of the policies and programs, typically what is called as a GRP, the gender related policies, you cannot be able to address the gender related budgeting, the GRB. So resource allocation, very key. We need to prioritize our resources. And if we need to prioritize our resources, we need to understand gender issues through the gender statistics. We have international reporting and accountability. So this may be from SDGs. We have approximately 80 gender-related indicators that need to be reported. We look again at the minimum set of gender indicators for Africa, where as a country also need to be reporting. So those are just quick highlights of what international reporting and accountability that is needed by gender statistics. Okay, so sources of gender statistics. We are somehow aware of the surveys, the censuses, the administrative data. So this is what we call the traditional, data sources that normally NSOs usually just get data from. But we also have what we call the upcoming data sources, that is the non-traditional data sources. Key among them being the CGD. This is a citizen-generated data. We also have the big data. And CGD, you can see on the slides. So this is typically data that is collected and produced by individuals or civil society organization, in order to monitor issues that affect people, communities, or environment. So the CGD data is one of the ways that KNBS is trying to explore as an additional source of data that is meant to address, existing data gaps that you're currently handling. So my colleague will speak onto that more. So let me not really dwell onto that much as of now. So next, we would want to look at the role of the CSOs. I've seen, this extends beyond them producing gender statistics or general just statistics in general. So apart from that, they are very core in terms of resource mobilization, or rather advocacy for resources allocation towards any gender-related issues or any issue in particular. Key also in terms of their roles is holding other actors responsible, especially the government, accountable for their actions. And this just entails the social accountability, transparencies, honesty, as the government executes its duties. So they're very core on that as well. Advocacy on gender equality norms and issues, majorly through the hard, to start off discussions, but advocacy through the CSOs is very key for us, even trying to address the gender issues. And lastly, they are very key on how they enhance effective coordination, collaboration on gender statistics program project with other stakeholders. So those are just briefly, but just to mention any role that the CSOs play beyond the data production. So lastly, I'll quickly highlight, what KNBS has done in order to support the CSO. So we have tried to create an enabling environment on how we coordinate and collaborate with the civil society organizations. So those are just to mention but a few, what we actually do. So development of the CGD guidelines, we are part of this with other key stakeholders. And in line with that, there's a quality criteria. Again, will be discussed into details later. We also support the CSOs by doing a data gap mapping, and this is majorly done on annual basis through us updating the national SDGs indicator framework and other ways of data gap mapping. But that's one of our main area of addressing or trying to identify the data gaps. Once in a while, we have data requests from the CSOs. So we are able to provide that usually guides them on how they plan for their programs or how they address their day-to-day running or any other issue or any other research or study they want to do. We also offer technical support. Again, the CSOs are allowed to come and request for technical support during their data production process, which we're able to offer. And lastly, KNBS has, it's always ready to support policies for continued collaboration. So we are always ready to give support to the civil society organization and to a larger extent, any other non-state actor that would need any help from us. So I think I would end mine there. I was supposed to take a maximum of 10 minutes and let my colleague take it up from there. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for laying the foundation. And as the partners listening, I would encourage if there are questions or comments or areas of further clarification, keep noting them, keep dropping them in the chat box as Caroline prepares to come back to respond. So at this time, I want to welcome Geoffrey. Geoffrey, please proceed to the next level of detail as far as application of the CGD guidelines are concerned.
Thank you very much, Crispin. Good afternoon again, everyone. My name is Geoffrey Kariuki from KNBS. Crispin, should I present or you present from your side?
Yeah, you can. Have you been made a co-host already?
Yes.
Please proceed.
Thank you. So I hope it can see it from the side. Great. So thank you, Carol, for the introduction, and thank you, Crispin, for having us in the meeting. So Carol has just gone through the overview of how we can use data, disaggregated data for reporting. I'll just go through citizen-generated data and how we are trying to use CGD at KNBS. We are calling it reuse because it is not data that was meant initially for official reporting, but we have seen the quality is sufficient enough for official reporting. So we have gone ahead to try and operationalize the use of CGD in Kenya. My presentation is in 6 parts, though I'll try to take the 25 minutes I've been given. I'll present on the use of CGD in Kenya, the CGD guidelines, what we call the CGD quality criteria that Carol talked about, and the score allocation matrix, the operationalization of CGD, the challenges, the recommendation, and the next steps that we are taking in the use of CGD in Kenya. So CGD has been there for quite some time, but the conversation about the reuse of CGD started around 2019, 2020. And back then, as we all know, government used to work disjointly with the CSOs. There was that disjointed working because government was doing its own things and CSOs were doing their own things. And in the midst of our conversation, we started having a conversation in 2019. We saw that we were lagging behind in reporting on SDGs, among other indicators. And then there was a lot of data that was coming from CGD. And then we saw it's an opportunity for us to try and use the data that is generated by civil society organizations for official reporting. The term official reporting is different from official statistics. Official reporting means we can reuse the data as a way of reporting on certain indicators for the Sustainable Development Goals. That is allowed for in the SDG handbook. So the conversation started in 2019. Through the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. And that's where we had our first conversation. I remember we went for a workshop in Nakuru just to learn about what CSOs do. They learn about what we do at Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. And it was very clear from that conversation that we were very distracted in terms of how we work, in terms of how we relate with each other. And so the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data sort of tried to come in and see how as the National Statistics Office, we can work together with the CSOs. And then the workshop was sponsored by GIZ, and it featured participants from civil society organizations, Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, and the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. And the idea here was to have a conversation about how we can work together with the CSOs and develop a very brief document about statistical quality. In our interaction, we realized that our definition of statistical quality is very different from what the CSOs understood as statistical quality, because we expressed our quality in terms of quality dimension, in terms of accuracy, reliability. And then we saw it necessary for us to develop sort of a guideline on how to generate statistics. So we adopted a document called the Generic Statistical Business Process Model, which is sort of a framework that was developed by the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. It is in version 2, and it basically guides National Statistical Office and other producers of statistics on the best way to go about production of statistics. So we go about the collection of statistics, how you analyze the statistic. That document to understand my connection is okay. Encompasses principles of official CGD, and back then it was a bit challenging to understand how CSOs produce their data, how they come up with the frames, how they come up with the design. So it was a very interesting conversation because we learned we have a very different way of working, and we had disconnect with the CSOs. So we came up with the data quality assurance and the data value chain, identify the purpose of which that data is produced so that you can target the people that you want to talk about, how to design a CGD collection, how to process your data, how to analyze, how to disseminate. And a big part of that was it is very crucial and was missing is evaluation. You need to do evaluation after you disseminate the data on the impact of your data. And an area that is very key for us, data privacy and protection, especially when we're having the data that can identify persons. It's very good to have a framework of how you have data protection and data privacy in line with the Data Protection Act 2019. So we developed that document. It is the first document that we came up with, I think in 2020. And that laid the framework for us saying we can take this collaboration further with the CSOs. I think the collaboration started there. And back then we were producing the Kenya Statistical Quality Assurance Framework, which is sort of a framework of how we assure statistical quality across all the areas we operate at the National Statistical System, at KNBS, and other areas. So we felt we can come up with a criteria for the reuse of citizen-generated data as part of the quality assurance framework, because we really felt it's important for us to venture into CGD. And remember, when you talk about CGD, we are not talking about data that was produced for official statistics. It was data that is produced to tackle issues that are affecting people, especially at the lower levels, where the National Statistical Office may not have the data. So it was also a good way for us to look at the people who are being left behind at the lower levels. And through Paris 21, we came up with the quality criteria for validated citizen-generated data. And we anchored that in our Kenya Statistical Quality Assurance Framework, which is a a document that describes how we assure quality in the production of our statistics. And that document was launched in the year that is last year, May 2022. And we are in the process of implementing the quality assurance framework. So what is this? We are calling the CGD quality criteria. Now, the idea here is to reuse the data from CSOs for official reporting. Specifically for the Sustainable Development Goals, we are lagging behind in reporting on Sustainable Development Goals. And data from CSOs may come in to bridge the gap, especially because remember after COVID, we had a big impact in terms of funding for statistics. And we were not able to produce all the indicators that we need for reporting on the SDGs. So we came up with a quality criteria. And as I said, quality is expressed in terms of dimensions. So for the quality assurance framework at KNBS and the National Statistical System, we have 11 quality dimensions. So for the quality criteria for CGD, because the data is not meant for official use, it's just meant for capturing issues that affect people. And the initial idea was not to use it for official reporting. So instead of using the 11 quality dimensions that we use at KNBS, we came up with 8 quality dimensions, because we understand that this data is not meant for official use. And the idea here is to have 2 areas in terms of scoring. We have what you call a gate entry requirement and a scoring matrix. So if I have, say, a data gap in terms of health, and there's a civil society organization producing this data, has been consistent, the quality is really good, then I can take that data and give it sort of a score. So the first place I'll start is through the gate entry requirement. The gate entry requirement is sort of filtering the data so that instead of taking all the data that is out there and analyzing, I can sort of have a filter into the data that is of relatively good quality for use in official reporting. And then I look at 3 items under the gate entry dimension requirements. I look at the need. Do I have a need for this data? Do I have a data gap that this data can address? And if it's a yes, I proceed to the next part, which is interpretability and clarity of the data in terms of the design of the data, how the data was analyzed, how the data was collected, and other things. And then the credibility of the data and the institution. This was a challenging part for us to come up with a scoring matrix, because remember, it's a bit subjective when you talk about credibility of an institution, but we felt it is very important for us to look at the credibility of both the data and the institutions. And for the gateway entry requirements, we have 2 scores. It's either a yes or a no. And you must score a yes in all the requirements. So there has to be a need, your data has to be interpretable, and it has to be clear, and there has to be credibility of the data and the institution. So that is the first part that we go through when we are looking at the data from CSOs. Remember, this process is inclusive. The person who has produced the data has to be there so that we're also able to understand the data and the way it was produced. And then after we look at the gate entry requirements, we go to the scoring matrix, and this is where we assign scores to the quality dimensions. We assign score on the relevance of the data. We look at, is it addressing a need at the international level, at the national, or at the lower levels, or is it addressing a need at the lower levels, at the sub-counties, at the wards? And then we give it a score of between 0 and 3. And then we look at the timeliness of the data, the time it was produced and the time it was analyzed. Was it collected in 2020, analyzed in 2023? Was it produced in 2019, analyzed within 3 months? And from there, we give it a score of between 0 and 3, depending on the timeliness of the data. Accessibility of the data basically means if I go to the website of that institution, how is it for me to get the data, accompanying metadata, documentation about the data, the publications and other things. Remember, we say statistics is a public good. So everything we produce at KNBS, we put it on our website, we put it on the microdata dissemination websites. So it has to be accessible to the users of the data. The other item, number 4, we look at is the methodological soundness. For SDGs especially, there's normally a methodology of calculation that is accepted internationally, and that is what we normally look at. Even when we produce statistics at KNBS, we look at the methodology of production. So we compare how that data was analyzed, collected, how the methodology flows with what is accepted internationally. And then the last part is about the accuracy and how the data reflects the situation on the ground. Are we saying unemployment is at 75%? Is that really the situation on the ground? We look at the accuracy of the data. We look at other accompanying terms for accuracy, and then standard errors, etc., etc. And then we give it a score of between 0 and 3. And then from there, we average the scores for the scoring matrix. So for relevance, I give you either 0, 1, 2, or 3. Same for timeliness, accessibility, all the way to accuracy. And then I average for the 5 quality dimensions. And from there is when I go to do the cutoff. So the cutoff here means whether the data has been accepted for use or not. And for the data to be accepted for use, it means 1, there are 3 areas it has to comply. 1, it must pass through the 3 quality gateway dimensions. Just to go back, those are need, interpretability, and clarity, and credibility. So it has to get a pass in all the 3. And then the next one is it must not score a 0 in any of the quality dimensions. Those are the 5 quality dimensions under the scoring matrix. So there must not be a 0 for relevance, timeliness, accessibility, methodological soundness, and accuracy. And then the last part is the average score in the scoring matrix must be at least 1.5. So if the data passes the three requirements, the minimum thresholds, we can use that data for official reporting on the Sustainable Development Goals. So that is something that we came up with and through the support of Paris 21, and it was an all-inclusive process. I remember the SDGs Kenya Forum was there. We had very many CSOs coming on board. We had the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, and then we benchmark from other countries. We had the UK, the Philippines, just the Netherlands, just to name but a few. And we benchmarked on how they're using their framework to do the scoring. We adopted it to the Kenyan context and came up with the criteria. So if you want to learn more about the criteria, you can go to our website and look at the Kenya Statistical Quality Assurance Framework on Annex 4. It has more details about how the scoring is done. Because of time, I'll not go through all the details. So after that, I actually wanted to highlight the journey of how we came up with the framework and where we are right now. So the first interaction was in 2020, but we came up with the CGD quality criteria in 2021. That was a draft through the support of Paris 21. And then the next step after we came up with the draft, we went and did data mapping questionnaire in 2021 through the support of SDGs Kenya Forum, which is the umbrella body for CSOs. And we mapped out the CSOs in the thematic areas that they work in, whether it's health, whether it's education, and other areas. We wanted to learn about the type of data they have in the thematic areas, and then sort of understand how the data can fill into the data gaps that we have. And we learned that 38% of the data was on gender-related activities, which is a very good way to disaggregate our data. And then after that, we came together with the CSO and finalized the criteria in March 2022 and annexed it in our quality assurance framework. And then immediately after that, we launched it in May 2022. And then in June 2022 of the same year, we had a workshop with the 10 CSOs who had 10 data sets. And we wanted to look at the data, especially on the thematic areas we're not doing well for the SDGs, and see if we can get data for scoring, score it, and then use it for reporting on SDGs. And it was a very good workshop. It was very interactive. And we managed to get 2 data sets from Uwezo and Usawa Agenda that we used for reporting on Goal 4, that is on education, in 2022. And we have since continued looking at other data from CSOs. We are working with the Performance Monitoring for Action, which is a project under the International Center for Reproductive Health in Kenya. So we have been interacting with them since 2014 in terms of data production. So we came together in 2022 and 2023 to validate their data set for reporting on goals 2, 5, 6, and 7. We managed to validate 13 data sets that we are now using for official reporting on our SDGs. So it's been a good journey for us. And in the SDG reporting framework for the year 2023, through this interaction with CSOs, we're able to move national indicator framework from 144 indicators to 162 indicators. So meaning we added 18 more indicators to our national indicator framework. Not all of them were from CGD, but there were quite a good number from CSOs. So that's good progress for us. And I think we are continuing to push this partnership with CSOs to see on how we can fill other data gaps that are there. So if you want to get the framework, it is under publications on our website. You can go to KNBS website under publications. You get the CGD quality criteria, you get the Kenya Statistical Quality Assurance Framework, and we have also updated the SDG indicator framework for the year 2023. So that one you're able to get from our website. So it's not been easy. We had challenges throughout this process, but I think we have come far. And as I stated, the initial challenge was teething problems, because I remember one CSO saying, you know, government, you guys are very hard to come by. You don't talk to us. You just release numbers without interacting with us. If I make a request, it takes 3 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks. It was a good engagement so that we understand what our users are feeling about our data. And we're able to understand how they work, how the areas they operate, how they get their funding, among other things. And this interaction has really helped us to grow as the National Statistical Office in terms of how we interact with CSOs and how CSOs interact with us. So initially it was problematic, but we have come a long way and now we are really collaborating with them. The second challenge was coming up with the thresholds for the cutoffs in terms of use of CGD data. Remember, this data, the quality aspects that we are looking at may be very different from that the CSO is looking at. And their purpose was not to produce official statistics. It was just to address issues that affect the people directly. So we had to agree on how to come up with the threshold, especially because of the quality side of it, and also to make sure that the data is also usable. You know, you can come up with a framework that will never have data scored for reporting. So we had to balance between quality and the usability of the data. And the other challenge is in terms of qualitative data. There's a lot of qualitative data from CSOs, and that criteria is mostly for quantitative data. So it's an area that we're still trying to work on to make sure that it's usable for official reporting. So our recommendations in terms of working with CSOs, and we are reaching out there to non-state actors to really come and work with the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. We realize there are so many partners doing very good things, especially at the county levels and sub-county levels. And that is the area we are missing data, and that is where people are being left behind. Because if you look at our reports, we normally cover at the national and at the county levels. Very few publications have disaggregation below county and sub-county levels. So that is where most of the CSOs operate, and it's a good way for us to get disaggregated data, especially for the counties. And we are saying partnerships are the way to go all through. We need to work together at Kenya National Bureau of Statistics with the civil society organizations, academia, and other partners in terms of data. And that is the only way we can be able to fulfill the 2030 agenda on SDGs, especially on tracking our progress towards that. So what is our next steps in terms of CGD and collaboration with CSOs? So we are trying to get CSOs coming together, attending their forums to sensitize them on what we do at KNBS, areas we can collaborate, areas we can partner. And then we are reviewing the criteria to address some of the challenges, especially on the qualitative data, the scoring of qualitative data. It's an area that we are trying to improve in the criteria. And then we are trying to map out the available data from the CSOs through the SDGs Kenya Forum, so that we know the people operating in the 17 SDGs, so that if I want to track something on health, I know somebody who is working there, I know somebody I can collaborate with, and other areas. And a take from the workshop we had in Mombasa, the first workshop we had in Mombasa, to score the 10 data sets from the CSOs, we agreed we are going to have a technical working committee on citizen-generated data. And we have progressed on that. We have already have the members. We have identified the members. We have identified their terms of reference. So now we want to have letters going out for them to appoint representatives to the technical working committee on CGD. This committee is supposed to make it easier for us to interact with CSOs and map out a long-term strategy about the use of CGD in Kenya. And part of that is signing of the MOU with the SDGs Kenya Forum. Remember, that is the body we are trying to reach out. We are trying to use to reach out to the CSOs. So we are trying to make it more formal in terms of our engagement by signing this MOU, so that we can collaborate on more areas on statistics. And I think that one should be done this month. The same with the launch of the technical working committees on CGD. So that is just a very brief on terms of CGD and the areas we are working in. But it's an area we have come a long way, and we hope to work further on it. So I'll share the presentation after and the links to some of those documents. I know I may have gone through some of the slides a bit fast, but it's because of time. Yes, so and I take it back to the chair, Crispin.
Thank you so much, Geoffrey, for creating the appetite, and we are so glad that a part of some of the organizations you've made reference to already here. I can see Festus Odingo of SDG Forum and others that have been part of the journey just to ensure that we have these guidelines. And I think to us, those who are meeting this for the first time and those who have had it before, I think it presents to us an opportunity in order to ensure that the data that we are generating would be data that is of high quality, data that is relevant, data that is timely. And of course, at the end of it all, we make it accessible, because we are not really competing, but ensuring that we are filling in the various knowledge gaps. So thank you so much for that session. We have quite a number of minutes remaining. If any one of us here, if you have a question, feel free to unmute, ask your question to Geoffrey and Caroline. And if you're not able to, just type it in the chat box. We have about 10 or so minutes for Q&A. Then we shall have our colleague, Sarah, come in just also to open up a discussion. How do we move forward? Any burning questions as regards to CGD presentation? Who's going first? Can I see some hands going up? I see someone there fearful. There's an emoji that shows fear. Could we know what's causing fear?
No. Hey, Crispin.
Hey, Festus, go on.
So sorry, now I was actually raising my hand, but I think I have bigger fingers. And I must have pressed on something. But I really had a comment and commendable work that you guys are doing, and even from the Bureau, based on gender statistics and citizen-generated data as a whole. And I know aspects of improving quality and availability of gender statistics is definitely essential for better understanding and just addressing gender inequalities and disparities. But I just wanted to really stress on the aspect that production and use of CGD just to improve gender statistics largely depends on investments on training and capacity building initiatives that just empowers individuals and even communities to collect and be able to analyze that data and even interpret it. Geoffrey has spoken about collaborative partnerships between civil society organizations, the National Statistics Office, and even academic institutions to just ensure that there's effective approaches to data. But as civil society organizations, we we've grappled definitely with the aspect of standardization, the methods and tools. So, and that's why I think we coined the CGD criteria to just give us a prospect on that. In fact, even the rigor was a little bit lowered for civil society organizations. I remember the NSO has to probably struggle with about 11 dimensions. So I think the gateway is still open, and we could do better. We also have aspects of validation and verification. If we just implement mechanisms to support the validation and verify CGD, and that's through CASCAP and chapter 4 of that document. I think the aspects of accuracy and reliability is going to be is going to be quite huge and a big win for civil society organizations. Not really mentioning other aspects of the data privacy, ethics, incentives for participation, and even aspects that borders open data and data sharing prospects. I think that would be very great and a great leap for the fraternity that we represent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Festus, for emphasizing the need. And I think this is also the beginning of those that element of capacity building. So once the appetite is created, I'm sure we would want to go deeper in order to know how exactly do we measure, how exactly do we ensure that the criteria of the scoring matrix is understood for what it is. What is a 0, what is a 1, what is a 2, and what is a 3. So I think those are some of the deeper details we would definitely want elaborated. Is there another hand? Anyone else who wants to add any question that you might? Yes, I see Miriam. Miriam, you have a question. Miriam's hand is up.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Crispin. I have 2 questions, and the first is to Caroline, and then the next will be to Geoffrey. So, I mean, when you talk about gender statistics, and I think maybe coming from a CSO point of view, we always talk about intersectionality and so on, that we know that gender is just not, it's not the same, yeah? Because you have different social identities, for example, age, sex, class, and so on. To what extent do you integrate this in your analysis and also in the collection of data? Now, the second question I would ask is, how do we determine need? I think Geoffrey talked about 3 gateways or 3 requirements for gateways. And I think the first was need, yeah? So how do we determine need? How is need defined? Does it have to be in line with the SDGs for it to be a need? Or can it be something else that, can it be something else? So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marion. Maybe Caroline, you could start as we see who else is asking a question.
Okay, so thank you so much for the question. So at KNBS, we purpose to basically produce statistics on individual based with the minimum disaggregation by sex, by age, by disability status, by regional differences, that is the county. But again, as Geoffrey mentioned earlier, is that we struggle to really get statistics lower than the county. So at least you can get data by county. So we are able to analyze these different gender issues, at that particular level. And then also in 2018, KNBS signed the Inclusive Data Charter that ensures that all statistics individual based are minimally disaggregated by whatever I've mentioned earlier. That is the sex, the age, the disability status, and other things. So yes, you're able to get that. And also we try as much as possible to ensure that different gender issues are integrated in all statistics, or basically just trying to do data production for a specific gender issue. For example, the time use statistics, gender-based violence issues, among others. Yes. But sorry, just a quick one, a follow-up on that. So we rarely do qualitative studies, we only do quantitative analysis, and we all know that gender issues are well understood. You know the why, because this is really a social issue, but it's something that we are yet to really fully implement. But we do a lot of quant, and it's something that we're trying to see how can we handle, how can we do more qualitative studies as well.
Geoffrey, after that, Purity will ask a question.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the question. I wanted to share something. I think I may have been a bit fast in terms of my presentation. So when you talk about need, there is a way we define a need in our criteria. So the need is a pass or a fail. And when we talk about a pass, we say the data fills required data gaps and fits within required geographical coverage identified by KNBS. So we have the geographical coverage, and we are talking about the national, the county, and at lower levels. So for reporting for SDGs, we are taking the national or using the proxies at the counties. But remember, we are talking not only about the SDGs. Most of the CSOs operate in the counties, and we have counties coming up with county integrated development plans. And most of those counties have a big challenge in coming up with data for policy that informs them about areas that they can target in the counties. So right now we are talking about use for SDGs reporting, but I say the collaborations and the criteria is changing. We want to go into areas that we may not be able to report on, especially the disaggregated levels at the counties and the lower levels. And this data is not only because we are saying this data was not initially meant for official statistics. We are just reusing it for reporting because we are not able to work at that level. Or maybe the survey we need to do to get information at the lower levels is the resources we need are quite high and the government is not able to give us. So we can take the data that is being produced at the lower levels by the CSOs and we use it for reporting, both at the county levels, at national levels, if the survey design allows us to do that. So I think, as Pester said, we may need to have a longer session to talk about the criteria on how we score a 0, which is not acceptable, and how we score a 3, which is very good, and the areas we look at for each of the quality dimensions. So I thought it's good I display this so that you can understand the context of need from KNBS.
Okay. Thank you so much, Geoffrey, for that. I hope it's satisfactory to Marion, and any further clarification can always be sought. Purity, then Tabitha.
Thank you. My question is on citizen-generated data can be faced with the challenge of biasness of, let's say, representativeness in terms of someone generating data according to how they feel or according to what they are looking at. So how do we ensure data quality? Though you have answered the question briefly, but I'm just thinking of also how do we ensure that our data is because not everyone can go through that training to look at how you look at data that is not biased and data that is it's fair. So how do you ensure that every CSO has that knowledge on how to collect data that addresses all these challenges?
Okay, thank you so much, Purity, for that. So Caroline and Godfrey, just note it. Let's get from Tabitha, then you respond together. Tabitha, please proceed.
Thank you very much. And thank you to Caroline and Geoffrey for the presentation. And also appreciating the initiative that has been happening. So for me, I'm pretty interested, especially from the gender angle and the fact that the presenters have been able to put it clearly that there are various parameters that have been put in place, and looking forward to interact with the guidelines. Since I want to believe that in the guidelines, the issue of intersectionality, like what one of the participants here was asking, has been well taken care of. But then when it comes to the citizen-generated data, yes, we appreciate really that this is a process, of course, that will potentially enrich the data landscape, and of course, empowering the communities and driving the positive change. But my interest would be to understand how the team or those that are spearheading, how will you deal with the issue of digital divide and ensuring that the access to technology and digital literacy then is able to reach to the hard to reach communities, so that they do not feel underrepresented or excluded from participating in the data generation. So is there a strategy? Is there a measure that will be put in place? Is this in the guidelines? Will this be in the system that would be used? That would be really my interest. Also looking at, what you get after manning the data. How do you plan to integrate those official data sources, so that ensuring that the citizen-generated data, as much as it will provide the variable insights, how do you plan to ensure that that data complements and enhances the use of the traditional data rather than replacing it? I think for me, that didn't come out clearly, and that would be my interest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tabitha. Those are really insightful questions, and I would definitely be interested to hear how Caroline and Geoffrey approaches that. And one of you could go first.
Thank you for the questions. I can go first. I can pick in terms of quality, the concern about the quality of data from CSOs. And I go back to the point where we talk about quality is expressed in terms of dimensions. And we talked about 11 dimensions for the National Statistics Office, but we have only put 8 dimensions for CSOs, because quality is improving. It's a continuous process. It's improving over time. Specifically, I want to go to the methodology, because that is where we found the biggest challenge in production of data. So for us, when we talk about methodology, we are talking about how you did your sampling, how is the survey design, is it documented, your method of analysis. We are looking at the scripts you used to run the data, how the analysis was done. Because remember, when you're going through your data, we're not trying to tell you whether your data is right, it's accurate or not accurate. I'm just comparing, is there a survey design? Does your survey design conform to the design that is expressed by KNBS or by SDGs in terms of reporting for that indicator? If it's yes, then it's a tick. If it's no, I'm not saying your data is bad. I'm saying it does not meet my criteria for official reporting. The same thing in terms of representation. It's a big challenge for CSOs, because most of them operate at the lower levels. So it's very difficult to get data that is representative at the national level. So the samples are quite small. And that has been one of the biggest hurdle. And I think at this point, I need to say that at KNBS, we have a sampling frame that is available for use even for the CSOs. And you can come to us and we give you a sample that is representative at the county, at the national, at all levels, and even at the lower levels. I don't know whether you're able to do representation at the lower levels. Personally, I know at KNBS to do such a sample is very, very difficult because of the resource requirement. So in terms of quality, we say, yes, there are challenges in terms of quality, but remember, we are using this data for official reporting. So it's a compromise between reuse and quality. That's why we assigned 8 dimensions instead of the 11 that we have at KNBS and what is recommended by the UN. And it's something that is continuously improving. We are going to come up with a version 2 of the criteria to actually handle some of the issues that are coming up. The idea here is to improve the quality of data that is produced outside government, so that we are also able to reuse that data it's data that has been developed using a lot of resources, and I think it's something we can tap into to feed into our own needs. We are not only using CGD, we are moving to other areas like web scraping, the use of big data, the use of other data sources that complement official sources. It's good if we have maybe say the DHS and you have given indicators at the county level and you also operate at the county level. It's good for us, it's good for you to oversight us and say, you got this number for this indicator, I got this number for this indicator. You look at your definitions, you look at your design, you look at the areas that conform to what we did and that do not conform, so that when we release a number for a certain county, you can also critique that number and say, I'm working at the same county, why is my number different? Why is yours different from mine and such? So we say we are not here to replace official statistics, because data from CSOs is also very good for oversight, but it's also good for use in official reporting. So in terms of quality, we agree, yes, it's continuous improvement. And I think we're also bringing the CSOs on board to help us improve the criteria so that it can actually address some of these challenges. Maybe Caroline can add.
So thank you, Geoffrey. So I think you've handled very well the question on the data issues. So the other question, although I didn't get it well, I think it was mentioning something to do with how to reach the hard to reach areas, through the guidelines, or what are we intending to do? So I want to believe that this is a very good input for us. But what I believe Geoffrey and team, also through the SDGs Kenya Forum, is as they do the mapping out of the different CSOs, what they do and where they are and their area of operation, that would basically be a very good guide on where everyone is and where everyone is operating from. So my belief is that the KMBS team will be able to develop specific strategies on how to sensitize and how to really be able to spread the word on the guidelines in general as we try to implement and the guidelines and the quality criteria. So I don't know whether that was the exact question on that. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And I'm sure as the criteria continues to be improved and as it's been alluded to, it's important to really get to know how do we capture the voice of the hard to reach areas and regions. We are almost coming to a close. And at this point, I want to hand it over to Sarah. Sarah, kindly take it up.
Thank you so much, Crispin, and thank you, Carol and Jeffrey, for an insightful presentation and for answering to our question and comments. And I think before we close the question and answer session, I just wanted to check with you both on whether for CSOs to be, included as producers of this CGD. I think one of your, on the next steps, one of your points was signing whatever, that they have to be part of the SDG forum. Do they have to sign up, or can they just reach out independently?
Geoffrey, you can respond to that.
Yes, I can. I think our mandate at KNBS is to support producers of statistics at the national statistical system. That basically means government and people who are outside the NSS, that is civil society organizations. So the reason we are going through SDGs Kenya Forum is that because they have, I think, more than 500 members, and it's easier for us to work with them. But if you want to come to KNBS direct, we have an open door policy. You can, if you have a query, you can write to us, you can visit us at our office, and we'll be able to support you. One of the mandate is building technical capacity, both at NSS and outside the NSS, and even improving the quality of statistics, even outside the national statistical system. So we are not telling you must join SDGs Kenya Forum for you to come here. Most of the people who have been coming independently. The reason we are going through them is because they have many members in thematic areas across all the 17 goals, which makes it easier for us to work with them.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you so much. We're so grateful that through this session, you've been able to share with us, a formula that can make our data more usable and more consumable at the national level. And I know that just like me, most of us were eager to basically just understand the criteria on how to make our data more usable. And I've learned a lot, including where the journey began and where we are now. So just to point out that the Women Economic Empowerment Community of Practice, we're a community comprised of researchers and practitioners, and our work spreads across lots of sectors and across lots of the SDGs, including Goal 1 on poverty, Goal 5 on gender equality, Goal 10 reducing inequalities, Goal 4 on education. We have an entire TWG that looks at, decent, education, goal on decent work. So our work would really contribute to a lot of what you're doing. And we are, since we are data and evidence focused community of practice, I think would really do much to input into, the national level kind of statistics and evidence, that can be used at that level. So for this brief session, I just want as members to look inwardly and to begin to digest all this information. And I would like to hear from us here on either on chat, or you can just unmute and put across your insight or comment with regards to how you see this information as relevant to our work, the lessons that we've learned here, and how you think we can move forward as a community of practice, as researchers, as data generators, and looking at the goal for the community of practice is basically for us to produce data together, to learn together. So what would you see as insights for us moving forward in a cohesive manner with regards to how we can produce data independently as organizations, but also together as a community? So we would be interested to hear from you so that we can take these as part of the next steps with regards to solidifying our relationship with the National Bureau of Statistics, and also in regard to, having some outcomes out of this particular session. So anyone can begin. You could unmute, you could put across your point on the chat in no specific order. Anyone who sees how this information is relevant and applicable to our work, how we can embed CGD in our data collection, in our reporting. What do you see as, potential challenges for us, and how you think we as a community of practice can basically work together to chime into the opportunities that are there to contribute to the national statistics? Anyone? Thank you, Dana. Please go ahead, unmute and go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to the KNBS team for that very informative session. In terms of going forward, I'm wondering whether we could begin even by identifying areas that we feel the existing studies, for instance, could be useful for validation. In fact, as Geoffrey mentioned, some of us have actually reached out to KNBS as JPAL. We had a session last month, just trying to understand how can we be able to get some of the evidence that's been generated by our researchers get validated. And when I think about some opportunities like the national care policy, which is already in motion, might we be able to leverage this opportunity to get some of the studies that have been generated by partners to sort of begin going through this validation process, knowing how we've gotten guidance from the State Department for Gender that for some of the studies, we may not be directly cited in policy documents if they're not recognized as national statistics. So perhaps this is a pathway to get in some of the very useful evidence that many of us are producing to be able to feed into this process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana. And maybe just to go back a little bit to Geoffrey, is there a cut with regards to how present data might be? Because it's true, as Diana has alluded, we have loads and loads of data that we've collected over time. So might you have any guidelines any guidance with regards to how far back you can take or we can look into as we look at the different data sets that we have?
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, we have right now the cutoff is 5 years. We want to have data that is not older than 5 years, and then the idea is to have not a one-off, not an ad hoc survey. It's a survey that it's periodic, maybe done every year or every 2 years, so that you can have sort of a trend analysis of what is happening. So we are discouraging one-off ad hoc survey because they give point estimates that may not really give us a trend of where we're heading as a country. So if you're doing especially surveys annually on a specific place can be really informative, especially on areas we don't have data. But it also goes to say that you may be producing data that is also available with us as the National Statistical Office. So we are trying to look into areas that we don't have data in the area you're working in. So right now the cutoff is 5 years in terms of views, and then at least it should be a periodic, so it should be a bit periodic, not a one-off survey or data collection exercise.
Thank you.
I hope I've answered it.
Yes, you have. Thank you. I think you've given us, a very great guidance with regards to the fact that data needs to be periodic, not one-off. And you've also mentioned that you're currently looking at areas where data is, where you currently do not have data. Might you have indications on perhaps what goals are currently lacking data, so that maybe that could also guide us on to what might be your immediate need with regards to the data?
Yes, we have. I think I can share that after the meeting. There are some indicators that we're not doing very well on. I may not have them offered, but I know we have some indicators that we are lagging behind, and I can share that immediately after the meeting so that people can appreciate where we are. I can share the 162 indicators we are reporting on as at June 2023 on the 17 goals, and then the areas that we have gaps, and then the members can be able to appreciate the areas that we don't have statistics for now.
Okay.
I hope that's okay. I may not have them offered, but I can share that after the meeting.
Okay, thank you so much, and that's well understood. So once you share that with us, we'll be able to relay that information to all our attendees today. So thank you, Diana, so much for those insights with regards to us, looking backwards and identifying what studies, and as we've heard, these must be studies that are a bit periodic data that we collect on same indicators often. And we can leverage on some of these studies to equally inform some of the policy discussions and conversations that are happening. So back to the team, anyone else, any other idea with regards to how we can utilize the knowledge that we have acquired today? Any other ideas on how this session has been relevant to us and how we can apply to our work? Okay, please feel free to put anything on chat, but also as we think around that, is there anything else that we would need to learn on this particular topic that maybe was not clear today, and we would need to get more information, or anything that you would need to be able to apply this knowledge better, and also putting in your insights on how the community of practice can support you or support us to achieve this. Yes, Purity, please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to ask about reliability of our data. Is there a way that it is manipulated, for example, or is it reliable? In short, because sometimes we're in CSOs, as you're designing programs, we want to design programs that are data that are answering to a certain data, because they have to be responsive to data that was collected. For example, if we are designing a program on GBV, so is there a way that data is manipulated to make it sound like GBV is highest at this particular county, and therefore programs that are addressing GBV are mostly in this particular county, as except as compared to where that it's really present? Or can data from KNBS be trusted when designing programs?
Thank you, Purity.
Thank you.
Jeffrey, were you able to get that? Are you able to provide us a response?
I think I got it. Yeah, the question is our data reliable for policy? That is the question.
Yes.
Yes. Well, our data is reliable for policy. Remember, as I said, Kenya National Bureau of Statistics operates like all the other national statistical offices, like the data we have released for the Kenya Demographic and Health Survey. If you look at the publication, I think we had more than 20 partners coming on board, and the methodology for conducting the DHS is well known. It is out there, except for questions that are in the country context, which they really don't encourage. So in terms of reliability of our data, most of our publications, if you go to chapter 2, we have the methodology of how we computed that indicator. And there's something we call replicability of data. Basically, it means if I give you the data, if I give you accompanying metadata, and if I give you, say, the codes that are used to run that data, you should come up with the same indicator. The numbers that I get should be the same as yours. And as KNBS, what we give you the publication, and then we give you the microdata and accompanying metadata. Metadata is the data about data. Basically, it gives you more information about the data. So if you go to our website, download the publication, and then you go to Kenada. Kenada is the Kenya National Data Archives, where we share the microdata. I think it's something you can replicate yourself, and we keep our data open to our users. If you request data, you always get the data. And the reason why we do that is because we want people to understand the methodology of calculation. Case reference is poverty. There are different types of poverty indicators. We have the monumentary poverty, which is about people who are food, or we are looking at cash in terms of cash. So if we say people living below this income are poor, it's about the monumentric part about poverty. Then we have what we call multidimensional poverty, where I'm describing poverty in different aspects. I'm looking at education, I'm looking at health. If I use these two methodologies to calculate, you get different numbers. The idea here would be for you, before you use a number from KNBS, please understand how it was calculated and if it fits to the context that you're in for policy, because different numbers are calculated differently and they feed into different programs. So where you feel like the data is not feeding into what you want, you can come to us, reach out to KNBS, understand how that number was calculated, and then understand if it can be used in your context to make policy. Most of the times it's not. Sometimes because of the disaggregation part, you find that you want to go to a level below the county, but the sample we had cannot give you an accurate indicator below the county. So if you want to target maybe a village, that number may not be very representative about that village. It will not be reliable. So the idea here is to understand how the number is calculated and if it fits into your context. That would be my answer. So the number is especially when it comes to definitions, you find people using different definitions for the same concept, but there's an international way of defining concepts. So that's why you find different people releasing different numbers. But if you replicate that number, you get the same number as reported. But in terms of use, different numbers have different uses. So it's just a matter of understanding the data. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Does anyone else have an additional insight, either a question, a comment with regards to how we can apply the knowledge that we've acquired today, and anything further that the community of practice can do to help us further this knowledge? And thank you, Beatrice. I'm seeing a comment on the chat. Beatrice Mukasa, county integrated plans is another opportunity for the CSOs to work on and agreed SDG issue together and to check the quality requirements to ensure reliability. And I do agree with you 100%. Thank you, Jeffrey, for the links that you have included on the chat. Members, please make sure that you download the materials there. I see we have the National Indicator Framework as at June, and we also have the Statistical Quality Assurance Framework publication here. Any additional insight as we near the end of this session?
A quick one, please.
Yes.
So on the National Indicator Framework I've shared, we have the classification on all the 17 goals. And the global indicators we are supposed to report, there are supposed to be 248 indicators. We are doing 162 indicators, and they are all listed in terms of the goals. So if you go through all the 17 of them, you'll see where we have gaps and possible areas for you to work on or collaborate with us to develop those indicators for feeding into the National Indicator Framework. So that one is broken down into all the indicators, into all the 248 indicators, what is reported and what is not reported. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that added information. Anyone else, so that we don't lock anyone with a last minute thought? Okay.
Just an addition, just an addition to what Geoffrey has shared. So I think I'll also type in a link. So as you compare the indicators that we are able to report on, you can also do a quick assessment on the 80 gender-related indicators for the SDGs, and that can also inform the gaps from a gender perspective as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you. So we look out to receive that as well. So we shall be sharing these links with all of you, and the presentation that the KNBS has made today. If you'd like to have any further conversations with the KNBS here at the Community of Practice, as the Secretariat, we are able to make that linkage. So please write to us through the email that from which you received the invitation from, and we can be able to make connections for you. I would like to hand over now the program to my colleague, Marion Ouma, who is a senior research scientist looking at women economic opportunity and security of our work here at ICRW, so that she can provide us with closing remarks and help us bring this session to an end. Thank you. Over to you, Marion.
Thank you all for attending this meeting, this virtual meeting. We appreciate your participation, and also as members of the Women Economic Empowerment Corp. I would like to thank the presenters, Geoffrey and Caroline. Thank you so much for taking your time for the rich presentation and engagement that you provided for us today. The information is indeed valuable. I guess I guess I'm not the only one who's learned a lot from the presentation and the insights that you've provided for us. Of course, we look forward to continue working with you, engaging with you. for the betterment and the well-being of society, of course, through data and evidence. And we'll call upon you as we need you, and as we feel we want to engage as individually and also as the co-op, as a community of practice. So on behalf of ICRW Africa, on behalf of our Executive Director, thank you so much once more. We wish you a good day, and let's continue with the conversation. Asante sana, thank you.
Thank you as well.
I guess then we can leave at our own pleasure.
Oh,
thank you so much.
We're waiting for that. Thank you.
We can leave at our own pleasure. Thank you so much to you all. Yeah.